This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. Jonathan Bennett and I will be talking with Mark Frischmuth of the DemocracyLab this week. That's coming up next. FLOSS Weekly is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Securing every access point in your company doesn't have to be a challenge. LastPass unifies access and authentication to make securing your employees simple and secure, even when they are working remotely. Check out lastpass.com/twit to learn more.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 598, recorded Wednesday, September 30th, 2020, DemocracyLab. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Twilio. Strengthen your customer relationships by uniting communications across your entire business. Get everything you need to build and deliver a new customer experience with Twilio. Go to twilio.com to learn more. And by Melissa. Like expired milk, 30% of your customers' data goes bad every year. That's money down the drain. Visit Melissa's developer portal for free access to data quality, APIs, demos, and code samples. Freshen up your sour data today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. Hi, everybody. Welcome to FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. I'm joined this week by Jonathan Bennett, my co-host, and we'll be talking with Mark Frischmuth of the DemocracyLab. A really interesting topic. And I recruited him in. My wife recruited him in because we think he's really cool, and what they're doing is really great. But first, we have to have a word from our sponsor. And this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Twilio. The world is changing fast. You need to build new ways to help customers, and you can with Twilio. Engage customers on any channel, anywhere, from text messages to emails, phone calls to video and more, all in one single powerful platform. Twilio powers more than 795 billion interactions across channels with 5 nines of uptime. That's 99 with 3 more 9% uptime across more than 3 billion phone numbers and more than 100 countries. Customers love what Twilio has done for them. For example, Shopify runs their entire global contact center, supporting more than 1 million customers on Twilio Flex, Twilio's programmable contact center solution. Blue Apron powers newsletter emails with Twilio Send Grid. Netflix keeps your online account secure with two-factor authentication from Twilio. Ride-sharing and contactless delivery services like Lyft and Uber connect riders and drivers over text messaging with Twilio. Product and operations teams use Twilio to create new ways to communicate with their users inside applications, ranging from account notifications with text messaging to chatbots to securing online accounts with two-factor authentication. Marketing teams use Twilio to get the word out, connecting with leads over text messaging and phone calls, sending campaigns over email, and building chatbots to answer questions. Customer service teams build global contact and support centers with Twilio Flex, a fully programmable contact center application platform. Twilio lets your developers control the global communication network with a few lines of code. Twilio is built by developers for developers. You don't need to be a specialized telecom network engineer to build incredible communications apps. If your developers build web applications, they can already build apps that text, call, chat, and video conference. So strengthen your customer relationships by uniting communications across your entire business. Go to twilio.com to learn more today. That's twilio.com. Twilio, it's time to build. Okay, so welcome to FLOSS Weekly, and welcome our guest, Mark Frischmuth of the DemocracyLab. Are you there, Mark? Hey, guy?
Thanks for having me.
Well, actually, wait. I'm not doing that yet because I'm looking at the wrong line. Excuse me, everybody. I'm still getting used to this thing. Welcome to FLOSS Weekly and Jonathan Bennett. Hey, Jonathan. Sorry about that.
Hey, Doc. It's good to be here once again. It seems like it's been forever since I've been on an episode of FLOSS Weekly.
I know. We miss you. We miss you. So, and it's long enough so that your hair is actually longer and noticeably so for those of us who are watching on video. This is isolation related, like you're looking at yourself mostly, and is that the deal?
Yes, we're still in the midst of COVID, and where I live, we've got some restrictions that I'm not excited about in the hair care, the barber industry, and so I'm kind of waiting until all of those go away, and then I'll go and get another haircut. And it's kind of fun to just see how long I can get away with letting my hair grow.
In my case, I can do it all I want, and it won't look any different. So but I meant this morning to actually put on a blue shirt and a jacket, so it would look like Jonathan and I were a team, but too much else is going on. So I'm just wearing the same T-shirt that I had on earlier. So you're in the middle of the country still somewhere, right, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Time zone straight.
Not quite locked down in the corporate headquarters here in the home office in Oklahoma, which to most people is flyover country, but we like it.
Yeah. It's so I'm still in California. I'm in San Marino, California, which is a suburb of a suburb, in around Los Angeles. And our guest this morning, as I mentioned earlier, by mistake almost, is Mark Frischmuth of DemocracyLab. Are you familiar with what they're doing, Jonathan? Yeah.
I took a look at it, obviously, when I was told that I was going to be co-hosting today, and it's an interesting project. It made me think of what GitHub is doing for code. It's like DemocracyLab is trying to do for people, for volunteers, for projects, not managing code, but managing other elements of projects. And I thought that was really interesting, and looking forward to seeing if they're getting a lot of buy-in and if that's actually being useful for people.
So because I got us out of order, I've already thanked Twilio for sponsoring the show. So we'll go straight to the guest. So welcome, Mark, to FLOSS Weekly.
Thank you, Doc. Thanks, Jonathan,
is.
for having me. It's great to be here. Jonathan, I really recommend taking your hair into your own hands as a COVID coping strategy.
Yeah, so Mark and I have the same haircut, which is like, I think, do you mow your head? You just go over it with a thing and let nature happen. Is that your approach?
Yes, it is both stylish and convenient.
Yeah. It's sort of half shave the top and the bottom, and I've got a thing I set on number 1, and I just go over the whole thing. Anyway, so tell us about DemocracyLab, because I think it's a really worthy project. Kind of come in at the top level, and then we'll kind of go down various paths.
Sounds good. Yeah, so DemocracyLab is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people who use technology to advance the public good. And the problem that we're solving is that we believe too few tech for good projects launch, prove their concept, attract funding, scale, and then achieve impact in the world. And a lot of this is because our economy doesn't look at the public good as being a primary driver of activity. The things that are profitable are the things that happen. And so that means that there are plenty of things that are really important that don't necessarily happen as often as they should. And so what we do is we help projects launch. And we do this by connecting tech for good projects with skilled volunteer labor. So the simplest way to explain what DemocracyLab is a two-sided marketplace connecting tech for good projects with skilled volunteers.
So how do you grab your skilled volunteers? Because I would think that's a tough one. Everybody's good at doing something. Is generally busy and employed. So how do you profile those? How do you look for them?
Yeah, and interestingly, that's not quite true. That there are lots and lots of people who either have time, apart from their day jobs, or that they are between jobs or making a career transition, and they are looking, in many cases, at volunteering as a way to upskill, to build their portfolios, to add to their resume, to expand their networks. And so we've seen that a lot of the volunteers who use our platform are doing so, one, because they want to, kind of be the change. They want to contribute to the solutions that the world needs in so many areas. But then from a more sort of selfish motivation, they also want to land their dream job. They want to make a pivot into doing something that they haven't done before. And so volunteering for a Tech for Good project gives them a chance to develop their skills and then showcase what they're doing when they're out in the job market, have interesting stories to tell in interviews, get letters of recommendation, all of those sorts of things. But what we have found is that the volunteer labor is actually abundant, that there are lots and lots of people who are in some ways dissatisfied with what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And this really sunk home for me with one of our very early volunteers when we started getting a code repository on GitHub and started attracting contributors. One of our early volunteers works full-time at a company that I'll leave nameless so as not to say anything negative about them. But his quote that stuck in my head was, I sell a little piece of my soul every day writing code to get people to click on ads. And I earn it back every night by contributing to DemocracyLab. And so I came to think of this as sort of an ethical debt that many people feel. If we look out at the world, the problems that we face are daunting, from COVID to climate change to inequality to systemic racism. These are problems that for many people feel too big to solve and feel like there's nothing that we as individuals really have the power and the agency to do. And we're really trying to change that narrative and change that mindset so that people, regardless of their skill set, but particularly people who have very valuable skills of software developers, designers, product managers, feel like there's an easy path for them to take action that results in positive change in the world. And so far we've seen a lot of traction in terms of the projects and the volunteers that we've been able to attract.
Hey, Mark, I'll jump in if I can. First off, glad to have you today. But I'm curious, what does DemocracyLab bring to the table that something like GitHub or GitLabs does not? It seems like, in GitHub, we've already got a project that allows volunteers to hook up with projects. What makes DemocracyLab special?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a big part of the answer is looking at the audience that DemocracyLab serves. If everyone on Earth was a software developer, we wouldn't need DemocracyLab. Software developers are in general pretty comfortable with GitHub. For people who are not software developers, GitHub can feel like a fairly confusing and uninviting place. And we did some research back a few years ago, back in 2017, where we interviewed a bunch of project leaders and a bunch of volunteers. And a couple of insights from that research are worth sharing. One was that project leaders, regardless of whether they were technical project leaders or non-technical, shared with us that they needed lots of different skills in order to be able to launch their project successfully. So not only did they need software developers, but they needed designers, product managers, they need marketers, they need people who can create financial projections, they need people who can fundraise, they need test users, all sorts of needs for for these projects to be able to sort of cobble together the team that they need to be able to launch their product and then gain adoption and have an impact in the world. And so for anybody but software developers, they just aren't going to find those projects if the only place that they live is GitHub. Another insight that we took from that research was that a lot of project leaders told us that the cost of onboarding new volunteers often exceeded the benefits. And this really resonated with me because I'm not a technical founder. I'm a guy who had an idea and for a while was just kind of wandering around meetup groups with PowerPoint slides trying to find somebody who would care. And the frustration that I experienced over and over again was I would find somebody who appeared to care, and I would share with them my vision for what DemocracyLab would someday be, and they were interested, they nodded, they were engaged, but at some point they either a half hour in or 10 hours into that relationship, they ended up disengaging before they ever contributed anything to the project. And what I found is that, so this was that cost of onboarding exceeded the benefits. This was that problem, and it played out in my personal experience. And what eventually we found is that there was tremendous benefit to transparency for projects. Not just about having the code up on GitHub, but adopting radical transparency where all of the project's documentation is public facing. And what we found that this allowed, once our platform was up and running and designed around these insights, was it allowed for, if you think about sort of a funnel of engagement, where at the top, volunteers become aware of a project, and at the bottom, they've made their first contribution to the project. Without this transparent documentation, a volunteer is going to reach out to the project leader as soon as they become aware of it. They're going to say, what's this all about? Can you tell me more? And that begins the clock ticking on the cost to the project leader of onboarding the volunteer. By having transparent documentation, it allows for that prospective volunteer to learn much more about the project before they ever reach out to the project owner. And a lot of those prospective volunteers are going to end up deciding this isn't something that is really a match for me. It's not something I'm going to contribute to. But they do so without ever taking up any of the time and bandwidth of the existing project team or the project leader. And so every time somebody self-selects out of a project, that's a win for the project leader and for the project itself. And then those who do, after reviewing that documentation, decide that they want to engage with the project leader, they're much further along the learning curve. And so, the success rate is much higher because these are people who've already educated themselves about the project and have made an informed decision that they want to engage and contribute. And then two, once they're in that place of engaging with the project, they've already learned a lot. So they've shaved hours off of their onboarding time through the review of the existing documentation that they've performed ahead of time.
That's a great long answer. We love that. You make our jobs easier. We don't have to drag the information out of you.
I've got some one-word answers queued up. So for the next one.
No, that's okay. We like the long ones better. We do have a question queued up from the chat room, actually. Jojo Dancer, one of our regular contributors from the chat room, asks, are they working closely with EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation? And I'll expand that a little bit. What are some of the larger groups that you guys have partnerships with, that you work with as you're trying to accomplish this?
Sure. So the short answer to the first question, no, we're not working directly with the EFF, though ironically, I was just on the EFF's website earlier this week and looked at some of the ways that they've outlined on their website for people to engage. One of them was coding on projects for EFF. And so on my to-do list is reaching out to EFF to see if they're interested in exploring the possibility of adopting DemocracyLab's platform to help attract volunteers to their cause. So it's a good prompt to move that up the priority list. Answering your question, Jonathan, what are some of the groups that we partner with? Most of the projects on our platform are grassroots tech for good projects. So they are not convened by a large organization that has adopted those projects. The partnerships that we have that are sort of recognizable names we've received a seed grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We have received corporate sponsorship contributions from Microsoft and from Amazon. We're regular participants in some of the Hack for Good events that Microsoft performs. I'm an active member in Code for America. I'm one of the brigade leaders for Open Seattle, which is the local Code for America brigade. And one of the things that we're really focused on now is a groups feature, which we believe will reduce barriers to adoption on our platform. One of the things that we found is that when we show what we're doing to existing Tech for Good groups, they generally like it. They think there's value in it, but there's reluctance to direct people away from their brand and from their community. So the kind of the baby step we've taken initially is creating a groups feature that allows for any existing Tech for Good organization to have a branded landing page on our platform where they can list just their projects. And so this is just imagining for a moment that somebody from Electronic Frontier Foundation is listening and they say, well, this is exactly what we're looking for. We could stand up, in a matter of minutes, really, a page for the Electronic Frontier Foundation that lists their projects, lists the roles that they're recruiting for, and then they have a dynamic, like, content management environment on DemocracyLab where they can direct people to engage with their projects. Our eventual vision for this is to white label our platform so that Tech for Good groups of all kinds can use our technology without having to direct people away from their domain. And we think that will really minimize any barriers to adoption, because what we care about is the impact in the world, not trying to displace existing Tech for Good communities. We see a much straighter path to impact by partnering and supporting existing Tech for Good communities rather than competing with them.
So we've used this term Tech for Good. I'm curious, what exactly is the requirement for an organization or business using Democracy Labs as a platform? So just, for example, if Microsoft were to say, hey, we've got Visual Studio Code, it's an open source project, it's a great project, can we use Democracy Labs to try to attract volunteers for that project? Is that something that works, or is there a tighter restriction on who can use your platform?
Yeah, so we want to say yes whenever we can. We're trying to include as many people and projects as we can in this Tech for Good definition. And so the way that we think about it is really kind of a 2x2 matrix. Either if a project is sponsored by a nonprofit organization, then whether it's proprietary or open source code, then that is a Tech for Good project. If a project is open source, whether it is supported by a nonprofit or a for-profit organization, then we consider that to be Tech for Good. Really, the sweet spot is when it is both nonprofit and open source. That's where we know that we've got nothing at all to worry about. And where we exclude projects, and without exception at this point, is if it is a for-profit entity that is building proprietary software, really regardless of what that code does, we exclude them for the legal reason that their minimum wage laws, and if a company's a for-profit company building proprietary software, it's tough to make any kind of legal argument that the people working on that project shouldn't be paid.
So I do have a follow-on question, a number of them actually, but I need to tell you this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. If you've ever forgotten to check the date on a carton of milk, you know what I'm talking about. Like milk, your customer data goes bad. In fact, up to 30% of customer data goes bad every year. Melissa makes sure your data is accurate and current so you reach the right customers. Their tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years. Identify your customers and get to know them, for example, by adding customer demographic information to your records, such as property and mortgage data, even marital status or social media handles. Melissa will fill in the gaps by adding emails and phone numbers. Identifying current customers easily allows you to find new prospective customers through Melissa's prospect database. Verify your addresses, emails, phone numbers, and names in real time. Incorrect data entered by customers, simple human error, or duplicated records makes it easy for bad data to find its way into your system. Melissa can help you verify your data at the point of entry. You can match and consolidate your records. Melissa's matching and deduplication tools help you uncover, merge, and purge hard-to-find duplicate records for an accurate 360-degree view of your customers. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget. With flexible on-premise, web service, secure FTP processing, and software-as-a-service delivery options, you can choose the best way to meet your unique business needs. Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. They have the utmost dedication to your data's security by implementing strong controls and safeguards when processing your data. Over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. Trust Melissa to be your foundation for data-driven success. Also, Melissa is supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. See if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online. So don't put up with sour customer contact data. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing with the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. Okay, so Mark, I'm wondering about back on the topic of people, and you say on the website, empower people to who use technology to advance for the public good. It seems to me there has been for actually some time a change in the zeitgeist, a change in the way, especially young people are coming at tech that is different than the kind of more purely utilitarian way that the last, I'd say, 2 generations. Mine goes back to the ham radio age, and then there was the earlier open source age when a lot of people got into it as a kind of cause. But now the cause is kind of outside of open source itself. That's succeeded. That's fine. Open source is great. It works. It's in the water. But there's a general sense of wanting to help the world out that in some ways transcends politics. I mean, we avoid politics on the show, but I think democracy isn't just politics. It's a way of participating in culture and in making the world work. And I think that's kind of what you're onto is how do we make the world work better? How do technologists step up in the kind of the way that in prairie times or in agricultural times, people get together and build a barn.
Yeah, I think that's true. This idea of kind of the commons and the one thing that's really interesting about 2020 is it's really illustrated how intertwined all of us are. That we, this virus traveled around the world in weeks, and we're all interconnected. We're all experiencing the same changes in climate. We're now at a place in a time where human beings have been, very successful as a species, becoming the dominant form of life on the planet. But we're now kind of bumping up against the constraints of the planet to support us. And I have thought, I've thought about this a fair bit, and also the role that capitalism plays. I'll still steer well clear of politics because I don't think this is a political issue as much as an economic one. There was the dominant ethos in capitalism for many years was encapsulated by Milton Friedman, who said that and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have this quote memorized, but the best thing that a company can do for society is make a profit. And capitalism has been extremely successful at creating wealth and at lifting many people out of poverty all around the world. But there are externalities embedded in capitalism, that the companies that are most profitable in the short term are going to be ones that are able to take costs that they create and externalize them to society or the world at large. So if it's really expensive to clean up pollution that an industrial plant creates, you're going to have a lower priced product if you just dump it in the river. And we see this not only in manufacturing, but in the information age and with technology. So this is a problem of the externalities of capitalism not being priced into the products is something that we see throughout economic history. And these externalities create these massive problems. And what has often happened is that people who become fabulously wealthy building companies, then once they've achieved this fabulous wealth, seems like start to think about, well, what was this all about? What is this all for? Why does it matter? And start using that wealth to try to address some of the big problems that exist in the world, many of which they may have had a hand in helping to create. And so this isn't a problem that we're going to solve, but it is, or at least the DemocracyLab is not going to solve. Any solution to these problems involve societal changes and changes in the way governments work and regulate. What we believe we can affect is giving people who want to be part of the solution an opportunity to contribute, to offer their talent to projects that are trying to address problems that can't necessarily be solved profitably. Because if we wait for profitable solutions to all of the big problems that we face in the world, we're probably going to be too slow. And the cost to ourselves, our children, our planet will be severe.
I was thinking, because you brought up Milton Friedman, whose work I read a long time ago, along with Hayek and others on that sort of that side of the thought spectrum. But at the same time, there was this kind of argument that he didn't have it as much with Peter Drucker as Drucker did with him, saying companies don't make profits, they make shoes. And that's and that's one of the things that I think is actually an advantage of open source in general, and of how it's applied. And there's a kind of a connection I'm trying to make in my head between the young techies I know, and I wouldn't include. I have a son who just got out of college last year. He's on his 4th job since then, and part of that is just the times that we live in. Part of it is that he's worked for 2 startups that he's already left, because startups tend to be temporary things. And he's not very political, but he does care about the world. This is in a kind of a non-political way. And I'm sort of looking at the younger generation as being a bit less doctrinal in the way that we in older generations thought of it, especially in this sort of capitalism versus socialism thing, neither of which I thought covered enough, or were too simplistic. But I think wanting to do good is actually simplistic in a constructive way. I think there's something in human nature that is inherently helpful. You know, you see somebody who's got a problem by the side of the road, you pull your car over, see if you can help them out. I think that's somewhat the spirit, and in business too. I mean, I look at the way people have coped in COVID times in business. You know, we have relatives in the restaurant business, and how they've improvised is really interesting. And an awful lot of open source is very improvisational in the sense that you're patching it forever, you know. So I'm trying to connect these. And I'm not sure if you can or not, but I'm kind of interested in if you can run with that.
Yeah, I think that you talked earlier about sort of a change in the zeitgeist, and I thought that something really interesting, arguably overdue, that happened. I want to say it was last year, was that the CEO roundtable really kind of refuted that approach from Milton Friedman that I described earlier, where they issued a statement saying that that companies did not have just a fiduciary obligation to their shareholders, which I think is a dangerous framing, because it says that anything other than shareholder value is secondary, but said that companies have a responsibility to all of their stakeholders, not just shareholders, but their employees, their customers, society at large. And this, I think, really perhaps is a lagging indicator of the change of zeitgeist that you were referring to. I think that the younger generation, the millennials and younger, are inheriting a world where the ideas of sort of rugged individualism become more difficult to justify. The idea of I control everything about my environment, my life. I have a white picket fence, and everything that happens within that picket fence is mine, and everything outside of it is somebody else's concern. It just seems awfully selfish and short-sighted in today's age, because so many of the problems we face are so interconnected. I think that one of the big divides, and it'd be interesting to hear Jonathan weigh in on this as well, because he's closer to this in Oklahoma than I am in Seattle, is this divide between urban and rural perspectives. I think that it is, the closer you live to people, the easier it is to believe that we are deeply interdependent and our fates are all entwined. And the further apart you live from people, the easier it is to really focus on what you control, because your interactions with those around you are more limited in their frequency and their scope.
That's interesting that you bring that up. I was kind of thinking about some of these same questions, and I think there is something to be said for how tightly packed together people are and how it changes our viewpoint on things. I mean, here in Oklahoma, we've got, ranches that are hundreds and hundreds of acres. Now, I don't live on one. I live essentially in a suburb. But we've got these huge ranches, and you could have somebody that's out there essentially self-sufficient for weeks, months, maybe even years at a time, and doesn't need to interact with anybody else. And that kind of a viewpoint is really baked into the culture, the ethos of the Midwest. And so it is interesting to see the difference between that idea and the idea of someone that's, lived in a downtown somewhere and doesn't have the ability to grow their own food if they needed to. So that is interesting to think about. One of the things that I was also thinking of when you were talking about this change in the zeitgeist, we have a lot of people kind of my age and younger, millennials as we are referred to. And I think a lot of us have come to the point to where we're tired of the political games from all sides, and we just kind of want to say, would the politicians just get out of the way and let us help people? There was a story, and I didn't look it up. Maybe I should have, but it was one of the large towns on the West Coast that has a very large homeless population, a problem with homelessness. And there was a group that just went out and started building tiny homes for people that were homeless. And one of these real small homes you can put together in a day, and it's a bed and a sink, and it's a place where somebody can live and not have to literally sleep on the streets. And the politicians in the city, the bureaucracy essentially came along and said, no, this area is not zoned for this and this and that, and they tore all the houses down. And we hear stories like that, and we think, well, if we could just get the politics out of the way, we could actually help people. And so it's refreshing to see a group like DemocracyLab's kind of working on that idea from that viewpoint, that let's set all of this stuff out to the side and just concentrate on what we can do that's good for people, that helps, that we can all agree on.
Yeah, actually, go ahead, Mark. Your show. I have a separate thing, but I'll bring it up later. Go.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Jonathan, that what we want to create is a feeling of agency, of empowerment, that I don't have to hide in binge watching Netflix or your streaming service of choice. I can go out and contribute to the solutions. And I think that it's kind of an old book now, but Cognitive Surplus, by Clay Shirky, that came out probably in the either the late 90s or early 2000s, was really helped for me to think about these ideas back in the early days of crowdsourcing, that people have this excess cognitive capacity that we can very easily find ways to waste that time, or to do things that maybe benefit ourselves but not necessarily contribute to solutions in society. But part of what the thinking behind DemocracyLab is what if we make it really easy for people to find a way to contribute their cognitive surplus to address these really difficult problems, or really small problems, really easy problems in their community, really close to their home, that aren't going to solve something intractable like climate change, but might help the local nonprofit that maybe is giving food to people who are homeless. Just helps them do that a little bit better, a little bit more efficiently. That by just moving the needle on helping people who are already doing good work in the world to do it better, is something that we really feel like is important to us, and then gives really a sense of satisfaction and a sense of meaning to the volunteers who participate. And just reflecting for a moment on sort of the generational change that is taking place in the country, where the millennial generation is the largest generation that our society, our country has ever seen, eclipsing the baby boom generation. My generation, Gen X, is just this little kind of dip in the middle that, will probably, just be watching as power transfers from the baby boom generation to the millennial generation. But I'm excited about that future because I think that for all of the flack that the millennial generation gets, that the priorities and sensibilities of the millennial generation are those that are going to be necessary to start solving some of the really difficult problems that we face.
So there's a context I'd like to visit here that actually I ran across in my early days with Linux journal, like in the late 90s, and the internet had just come along, but it was really more more for wizards than muggles, and a lot of people were still like on AOL and stuff, but there was a critical mass of developers, of people writing their own code and working on Linux and working on MySQL and the rest of those, and when I would speak to groups of these guys, and they're mostly guys, hate to say, but that was then, where'd you learn this? Where'd you learn to code? And almost without exception, it was not in comp sci class. It was on their own. It was from my friends or on my own, by myself. And to me, I think this models a kind of the agency you were talking about. You brought up agency earlier. And agency is a term, the power, which is the knowledge that you can have an effect in the world, which is what agency was in the first place. It's from the Greek to do, actually, originally, the root word or words. And I'm wondering to what degree we in the developer world, as it were, that have been here for a while, or even are new. I mean, my grandson is 13 years old. He's already programming in Python. He got tired of just gaming, right? So now he's doing something, right? And he's probably writing game stuff in Python. I don't know, but he's bragging on it, and he's self-taught at it. He's not learning that in school. He doesn't even have school right now, right? Everybody's at home, and the tables have been turned over. But there's maybe what I'm talking about here, or what I'd like you to go on, is it's kind of like the opportunity for agency is kind of raw and huge right now, and we can start looking at where that goes.
Yeah, I think that this is it's, I guess, an understatement to say that this year has been unlike any other, and the losses that people all over the world are experiencing are terrible. If anything good is to come of it, it is going to be a greater recognition that we're all connected, and that, in my opinion, solving these problems needs all brains on deck. We need everybody who's capable of contributing, which in my mind is everybody, to be thinking about the systems in place, the problems that we have, the way these systems have contributed to the problems that we face, and to be creative and to do the work. To a title of another talk, a man named Joshua Simmons, who's the president of the Open Source Initiative right now, he had given a talk about his own passion and his own work that was titled Necessary But Not Sufficient. And, that's really, the way I feel about my own work, the way I feel about what so many people are doing in the world of open source and the world of tech for good. Is what we're doing is absolutely necessary, but so far it's not sufficient. We have to do more, and I don't. In some cases, that's we as individuals have to do more, and the other way to get greater output is get more people involved, and that's really, I think, the where the greatest opportunity lies, is for us to expand the base of people who are really part of this movement, this tech for good movement, this grassroots volunteerism and contributions to the solutions that we need. And it's it's a matter of, for many people, creating a sense of hope that they can be part of the solution, that they can do something that matters, because for many people, that's not what life has taught them.
Hey, Mark, it's been a super interesting conversation. We are really close to running out of time, and I want to get one more question in about DemocracyLabs proper, and
Sure.
that is what is the structure of it look like, and what does the governance look like? Is it a corporation? Is it a nonprofit? Is it one of those corporations for public good, kind of in the middle of the two? And then what does the governance structure of it look like?
Yeah, so it is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so public charity. We have a board of directors that has governance responsibilities to manage the organization. We are I suppose as of tomorrow, an all-volunteer organization. We were able to hire our lead developer back in April with some funds that we had received. That funding is run out, and so we will be as of tomorrow an all volunteer organization again. And really, the way that how I would describe our organization is we're a duocracy. And that's a term I'd heard years ago. I don't know that it's particularly common in sort of common conversation, but our philosophy is that the people who are doing the work have an outsized say in the direction of that the organization takes, and so it's a very collaborative process. If you go to democracylab.org. What you'll find is a Democracy Lab project that is listed among all of the other projects. We're really eating our own cooking. And if you click through to that Democracy Lab project, you'll see open links to our GitHub, our Google Drive, our Trello boards, our Slack team, and really anybody can click into any of those links, join our Slack team, and start being part of the conversation. Find where they fit in, whether it's as a software developer, a designer, a fundraiser, a product manager, whatever the case may be. You'll find links to all of the meeting notes that have ever taken place, and really are welcome to start contributing to the team. And as they become a regular contributor, their voice matters in terms of shaping the direction that the organization goes. Now, as a nonprofit, ultimately the board of directors has decision-making authority, but they do that with from the perspective of a fiduciary responsibility to the mission of the group. And so, that is, I guess, not too long-winded, I hope, of an answer to your question. One other thing I'll quickly throw in, just because I know this audience is one that is probably the majority of the people listening to this broadcast are probably software developers. This is probably our greatest need. We have benefited from really the heroic contributions of a few developers. What we are really focused on now is building the capacity of our team by bringing in new people who are who believe in the potential of what we're doing, that this is a high leverage opportunity to create civic infrastructure that allows sort of 1,000 tech for good projects to bloom in the world. And if you're a developer and anything we've touched on today really inspires you to take action, we need your help.
Well, this has been great. We have some closing questions we usually ask, and the first, is there anything we haven't asked? You may have just answered that, but in case you haven't, if you have a brief answer to that, that would be a good one.
Nothing particularly pops to mind. I think I'll let you know if anything.
Okay, yeah.
As we're touching on other questions.
Yeah. So the next one is blockchain involved anywhere? That's our control question. We ask everybody something about blockchain.
Yes, it's all blockchain and machine learning. No, I'm kidding. No, we some of the projects on our platform use blockchain. There's really, from a technological perspective, there's nothing terribly complex about what DemocracyLab is doing. And even the marketplace we're creating or we have created, and many of the things we imagine for the future, these are not we're not solving new problems. We're just focusing the solutions on an audience that is neglected, which are Tech for Good projects and the volunteers who make them happen.
That's great. So the last two questions is what are your favorite scripting languages and text editor?
Well, you're asking the wrong person. I, as a non-technical leader of the organization, my answer to both of those questions is whatever my developers like. I don't get involved in making decisions about our tech stack unless there's a very compelling reason for me to weigh in on those things.
Well, that's great. Thanks so much, Mark, for being on the show. This has been great, and I hope the show works for you. I hope that this raises a profile of DemocracyLab. You're doing really, really great work. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being with us today.
Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Doc, and thanks, Jonathan. I will look forward to what comes next.
Great. So Jonathan, how was that for you? You came in knowing close to nothing, and now you asked some great questions. I thought.
As we normally do, we are a proxy for our audience. We get in trouble if we know too much about a project. No, it seems like a great idea. I thought it was really interesting. Kind of one of the points he made is if you write code, if you're a coder, then GitHub or GitLab is perfect for you. But there are groups out there that need people other than coders. They need businessmen. They need people that know marketing. They need people that need accounting, and GitHub is terrible for trying to recruit those people. And I thought that was a really interesting point. And as far as I know, there isn't anyone else out there that's for volunteer organizations, for open source projects, that's trying to put these people together. And so that's great. I also thought it was really fun that we were able to, hopefully without becoming too political, we were able to kind of touch on this idea of there's a lot of us that just, we want to be helpful. We want to do away with some of the political nonsense and just be able to help people. And it's encouraging to me to see a project that's out there that, that's kind of their ethos.
Yes, it's the same for me. I think it's also good to hear kind of where it dovetails and supports others. I thought your question about the EFF was a good one. What else, how do these things fit together? I like that Mark brought up Clay Shirky also. In fact, I was thinking, boy, we'd have Clay on the show. I've known Clay for a long time, and I think he's been in China for a while. I'm not sure where he is right now, but he's always had good and quotable things to say there. But his books are relevant on this thing too. I'm trying to remember the name of that exact book, but it doesn't matter. We're in an interesting moment right now, an interesting time where the table's been turned over. We're not playing chess anymore. We don't even, whatever games we were playing, it's all different now. And I think there's just such a huge opportunity for people to step up in whatever way they can step up. And I think that FLOSS and people's expertise at that, or even being around it, I think Mark and I are similar in the sense that both of us were more in administrative positions than in positions to code. And but knowing lots of people who do write code and are and make hardware, and make hardware work and pull things together, I think it's important to have those guys too. Also, they're not old guys. That's another one that especially the millennials that I know are very big on that. It's like, I've got friends over here that are diverse in one way or another, and bringing them in as well. I mean, everybody's got something to contribute. We're all different on purpose, so we should be able to bring whatever we have to the table. Yeah. So what do you got to plug? And the usual, I suppose, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'll mention over at hackaday.com, I run a security article every Friday. Friday morning. It runs Friday morning. I usually get it written, finished up on Thursday night, and it runs Friday morning. So check that out. And then hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'll have another one coming up talking about some of the changes in Chrome OS that Google is talking about. That one's kind of in the works, but look forward to that too. And then you can follow me at JP_Bennett on Twitter. And I promise I keep it free of politics. So if you want just security, open source, and tech talk, that is the place to come follow me.
Okay, well, thanks so much. Thanks to Mark, and thanks to you, Jonathan. There's and I want to plug next week that when we have Christine Peterson on, Christine's with the Foresight Institute, and we'll be talking about kind of a consistent topic, advancing beneficial technologies. But one interesting thing about Christine is that this show would be called Fool if it wasn't for her, because she's the one came up with open source as a term way back then in 1998, and she could tell us why that happened. So that's going to be a fun thing. So thanks a lot for being with us on FLOSS Weekly. And now I just have a feeling I'm doing something wrong, and the show say goodbye. Okay. Okay, everybody. This has been FLOSS Weekly. I've been Doc Searls. Probably will be next week, too. Thanks a lot for being with us.
I'm Jason Howell, host of Hands on Android, where each week I take a look at the Android operating system and really dive deep into what it can do for you and how it can improve your quality of life, whether it be tips and tricks on how to use it better, whether it can be little known secrets that open up a world of possibilities. So many topics to dive into, including your emails. Subscribe by going to twit.tv/HOA. We'll see you there.